USS Enterprise shakedown cruiser report. I think this new ship was put together by monkeys. Oh, she's got a fine engine, but half the doors won't open. And guess whose job it is to make it right? See, that was my best Scottish impression, wasn't it good?
That was Scottish.
It was my attempt. It was, it was more Simon Pegg than Jimmy Doohan, but we do our best.
Okay.
I don't want to go too broad and offend our Scottish viewers,
It sounded more like Jimmy Nail.
That's just my accent.
Well, that's what I thought.
USS Enterprise shakedown cruise report. I'm gonna leave it. Screw it. Right. It's a big river. Anyway, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back aboard, fellow travelers of the Final Frontier, to the newly christened Who Trek channel if you are watching on YouTube, or the newly christened Media Matters station if you are listening to our podcast feed. Yes, we've had some rebranding done, and before we go any further, I should say Happy New Year, because that's when you're going to be listening to this. We've had a bit of a delay. This is an episode that has been on the docket for a while, but various things have conspired to make it a little bit delayed. So as it is, even though we are on all of this, renamed, rebranded stuff, this is going to be one of the most familiar things, because this is not a Doctor Who episode for the Hit or Miss. It is a Hit or Miss Star Trek, as will be familiar to you. We're going to be doing a film review, so we're going to have a little preview of it on the Silver Screen podcast, and it is also going to be the final episode, at long last, much delayed, in our kind of controversial, unpopular, unloved Star Trek stories series. I nearly said episodes, but of course we're looking at
shit.
Well, I was trying to be diplomatic about it, but I don't think they've all been terrible, to be fair. We've looked at a few, and the leaderboard itself, I think, bears fruit that there's a few of them that are actually fairly high up. It's just, for one reason or another, they come under controversy. But anyway, we'll see what we think of this one. In any case, I am your captain, Mike, joined as always by loyal number 1 DK, who you'll have heard earlier. Hello, buddy.
Hello, yes.
As I mentioned,
looking forward to this, but I'm not entirely sure.
Well, somebody's going to do it. But yeah, as I said, today we're charting course for the conclusion of that Hit or Miss Trek series on controversial, infamous, and divisive stories. And we are going out with a bang, or perhaps a poorly executed Starship launch, how fitting, by tackling the cinematic oddity that is Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Now, we were going to be joined on this journey by a couple of guests. Unfortunately, like I said, we've had to reschedule this various times. Things have happened entirely my fault, or more accurately, my landlord's. But but we've had to sort of shuffle this around. So in the end, I'm afraid you're left with just us regulars, myself and DK. But again, as we go through a lot of changes, perhaps that familiarity will be nice to kind of ease you into these things. That's the hope anyway. So yeah, it'll just be us. But I do actually have some sound bites, or one long sound bite, I should say, from Jeremy. I'll guess Jeremy Duncan, who was going to guest on the episode and is a big fan of Star Trek V, and he's also contributed his kind of favorite things and his score for the end, so that we can count it, so that there's not just the two of us, if that's okay with you, DK. So,
yeah, that's fine.
Cool. And a shout out to Adrienne, who wasn't able to make it because she's working, but was going to be here. But I'm sure we'll hear her again at another time. So, yeah. As I said, depending on when you're tuning in, you'll be hearing this on Hit or Miss Who Trek, or Hit or Miss Star Trek specifically, or you might be catching the early cut down preview on the Silver Screen podcast. But either way, buckle up for Spock's jet boots, marshmelons, and one of the boldest misadventures in Trek history, where we try and find out if the Final Frontier deserves its infamous reputation, or if there's a hidden gem hidden amongst the chaos. Let's boldly go and find out. So, that's what we're going to be doing here today, DK. Just a small thing, just a full movie to look at and try to appraise that's been around since 1989, and people have been trying. So, but before I do any of that, I do have to say, if you're listening on the Hit or Miss channels, I am not going to be doing a Hit or Miss section, but I felt like considering what's happening in the world of Trek at the moment, it would probably be appropriate to start with a little hailing frequencies open. This will just be for the Hit or Miss loyal listeners or viewers, as opposed to the silver screen. But DK, are you happy to jump into hailing frequencies?
Yeah, go for it.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
So I'm sure you know what's coming, but basically, at the time this will be going out, shall we say, Lower Decks will just have concluded, and safe to say, one of the weirdest cancellations I think that we've ever had from Paramount, particularly on the back of what was, without a doubt, the strongest season of the show. Bizarrely enough, now in full disclosure, we haven't all watched the finale yet. It's a busy period, and some of us don't like endings, and we've had Christmas and everything to worry about. But certainly, I can say for sure that we've both seen 9 out of 10 of the episodes, and I've loved this season. I think there's only been one episode that I haven't thought was like 8 or 9 out of 10 worthy, and yeah, it just seems like an odd choice to scrap it now. Are you of a similar mind, or?
I am, but it's been a while that we've been doing these kind of things now, and my feelings on Paramount when it comes to their business acumen. It just seems to be run by monkeys, as you said. The the Enterprise A rebuild. It just seems a stupid decision. Basically, I could understand it if any kind of quality had suffered whatsoever. Or if those working on the show said, "Yeah, we want to bow out now," fine. But just to drop it as it is. But this is Paramount. We've seen it. We saw it with Prodigy. We saw it with Discovery.
I'll be honest, though, in both of those cases, I kind of did feel like they never really hit S tier greatness. So I wasn't devastated that they ended. I mean, Prodigy I would have been if it had only gotten that first season, but my feelings on the second season. I just felt like, all right, fair enough. If you're going to end it there, maybe it's for the best. I don't know. I there was something with me in that second season where I just didn't respond to it at all. It felt like such a huge step down. So, and at the end of the day, I just looked at it as, Lower Decks is going to have had 50 episodes. Prodigy will have had 40. So,
Yeah, I didn't mind Prodigy. That second season, I'm sure there might be one or two that disagree with me out there, but there might be some that agree. It reminded me very much of of a plot line from the books where they were closing down the timeline, the book timeline, Star Trek Coda. It seemed very much influenced by that, and I kind of dug that.
I think that was my biggest problem with it, was that it kind of, for me, it's season 1 was kind of a love letter to Star Trek, and season 2 just became fan fiction. If you know what I mean. So it was kind of like, oh,
okay. It did seem, I don't know, it wasn't as striking. It wasn't as striking as that first season, but I still loved it, and I devoured it. Basically, I had a great time. So yeah, I was good, but I mean, that even before season 2, it had a very strong first season, and for Paramount to do that, I don't know. And Discovery was always treated like the kind of red-headed stepchild of the franchise, which I think is extremely unfair. And without getting into it, we know why a lot of why it received a lot of bad publicity. But I think cancelling it on season 5, I don't think it was the way to go. I could have happily watched another couple of seasons of that. I really wanted to see what happened with regards to the whole Calypso thing. That would have been good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because I've watched the box set now, and I remember when it came out that they'd been cancelled, but it was so long after they'd filmed the season. And I was like, well, it's kind of fortuitous that you had episodes like the one where they do the flashbacks through time and stuff, which feel kind of, last season-esque, like looking back at where we've gone. And I thought, how generous it is of Paramount to say, okay, we're cancelling you, but since we didn't tell you, here's an extra kind of 20 minutes to do an ending and wrap things up. And at the time, I thought it was generous until, like I said, it came out on the box set and in various interviews since that Michelle Paradise had told Paramount, our plan for season 6 is this. We're basically going to link fully up to that Calypso short trek and take a full season exploring how we got there and what the purpose is. And Paramount were like, cool, you've got 20 minutes to do that. It's like that's generous when you look at it like that, really, isn't it?
It's annoying. It's annoying. I like Discovery. I love Discovery, but it's not something I can rewatch with any great
I can't
drive. I think it's more down to the arc-driven way it was.
It's not something you can dip into a single episode of, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not. It's not like let's watch Bride of Chaotica or something like that. Which is always a bonus. But yeah, gutted for that. Especially gutted for Prodigy, and this just feels like another kick in the unmentionables. To be fair, especially when it's. Yeah. And I'll be the first one to admit that when Lower Decks first started, I really wasn't that thrilled about it. I've never been a big fan of like that kind of humor, and I didn't think it would fit in a Star Trek, but it's won me over. It's won me over these last 5 seasons. It's obvious that the people putting it together have a tremendous love for the franchise. And
completely, yeah.
It's self-deprecating, but it never feels like it's undermining the franchise as a whole. It's poking fun at it, but it's poking fun of it with love, and that's what brought me round. And considering how strong it is, especially as you said this season, and this last episode that I saw, it just seems like another one of those silly business decisions. And I then think it'll get to the peak of popularity with regards to Strange New Worlds, and then Paramount are going to do the same.
Well, I'm convinced it's this whole thing, and I'm sure you've heard it, whereby because it's a streaming service, they have to renegotiate because they organised strikes or whatever. So there's the rule that they've got to renegotiate after 3 seasons and 5 seasons, and they have to give all the talent involved a pay rise of so much percentage, because that was something that people had kind of campaigned for. And so instead of doing that, they just cancel the show or cancel it and go back with a new name, because there was all kinds of uproar about the fact that when Disney Plus bring back Daredevil, they're treating it as season 1. And a few of the creatives were arguing, well, no, this is season 4. If you're carrying it on from the Netflix continuity and you want to acknowledge that all that stuff happened, you can't then launch this as a 4th season, because it's not as a 1st season, because it's not. It's the 4th one. But they're like, well, yeah, but we've given it a whole new title because it's Daredevil Born Again, so it's basically a relaunch or a reboot or whatever. So we're paying you as if this was the start of something new. And I was like,
so it's just more dodgers basically for money, which is the whole. Dragging us back to those tax dodge moves and stuff like that.
That feels a little bit like what's happened with Discovery, if I'm honest, because it's weird how they kind of, despite some criticism, and I'm not one of the ones criticizing it, it feels a little bit like Starfleet Academy is kind of like, okay, we've got all of the assets and resources and the CGI to stick around in this century, maybe even bring back a few of the actors, but it's not Star Trek Discovery, so we can start from season 1. And it's kind of like, okay, I see why you may have done that then, pretty rubbish. But no, I think Lower Decks in particular could have ran, because if there's anything we've seen this season and the last couple of seasons, let's be honest, it's the way that it can comment on Trek that's gone before and do things like bringing back any number of obscure guest stars or people that we didn't think we'd hear again, uniting all the series in a way that
people that you never thought you'd hear again, to be fair, involved in Star Trek.
And plot lines that you just would never have thought you would have happen. I mean, things that, okay, they've existed in fan heads and fan canon for ages, but you were like, well, it's never going to happen on TV, or from one reason or another, or one person or another blocking it, and then Lower Decks can come around and be like, nope, we'll do that. Why not? They're unashamed to do it. And I think Paramount are going to be foolish if they let Mike McMahon go, who created Lower Decks, because I mean, he said it himself. He started off literally with a Twitter account back when it was Twitter that was Next Generation Season 8. which was made into a book, which I've actually got, which is like, it was just literally silly tweets about like, oh, this would be what would have happened in a lost 8th season of Next Generation. And it was like a TV guide description of the episode. So it would say something like, oh, Jodie falls in love with a sentient computer and must, decide whether or not to terminate it for the sake of a planet's lifestyle. And meanwhile, in a subplot, Wesley returns to the Enterprise, but then eventually realizes nobody likes him or whatever. The stupid stuff. That's a terrible example, but stupid stuff along those lines. So you could see that like McMahon loved Star Trek, and especially that next gen type era. And Lower Decks to me feels very much an extension of that. But like you said, it's somebody who's got that comedy chops and will make fun, but it's purely from a place of love. And I think that's true of all the people involved. So it's a shame like they haven't got anything like that going, as much as they might be supposedly trying to launch other comedy stuff, which may or may not work. I mean, it's a bit of a coin toss, I suppose, at this point, especially when one of them's live action. But I think it's so dumb to have let Lower Decks go. It could have been like the Star Trek equivalent of like Family Guy or The Simpsons or whatever, and just ran for forever commenting on the stuff that's going on or has gone on in the franchise that's been running 60 years. Either way, dumb choice. But so just quickly before we move away, then we are, as this goes out, like I said, that's kind of concluded, but we are, believe it or not, mere weeks away from Star Trek Section 31, the movie dropping. Yay? He said with a question mark.
The trailer makes it look more fun than I envisaged it was going to be, but I'm still not entirely sold.
I don't want to sound overly moaning about it, because I saw immediately the people that whinged online and were like, it's not Star Trek, blah, blah, blah. And like, my initial gut reaction to that is to go the other way and be like, anything can be Star Trek, shut up. Because I hated that with Discovery of like, no, Star Trek, blah, blah. And I was like, it is. But even though I hate Section 31 and don't think of them as a very Star Trek-y thing, it's a Star Trek thing, get over it. And it feels really kind of pathetic to complain on that level when you've already had something you don't like knocked down from a series to a 90-minute movie. Like, even if you hate it, it's 90 minutes, just don't watch the damn thing,
Yeah. And I think people are still of this mindset that because they like Star Trek, everything Star Trek must be for them. And so there's a kind of a question of, I don't know, limiting your own views, as it were. And, therefore, when something Star Trek comes out that I don't like, it can't be Star Trek. It's kind of a modern paradox with these people. And I don't get, I mean, it could come out and I might not like it. I don't like, as you know, I don't like the fight. It doesn't make it not Star Trek.
Yeah, and it's a Voyager, of course. Yeah, it stinks. It's probably not going to be. It's not going to be the first time we've seen a bad Star Trek movie, and we still accept them all. He said, as we're about to review Star Trek 5.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, what happened to people watching something and just making their own mind up it and saying, "Yeah, that wasn't for me. Move on to the next thing that probably is for me." I don't get why they have to be so territorial about it and just say, if it's not for me, therefore anybody that likes it must be wrong. The people that are running the thing are just insane. I don't get it. It's such a sweeping generalization just based on opinion alone. And I think it's without getting into sociological issues, it's certainly a view that's developed a lot more since social media, because you would watch episodes of The Next Generation, and when you start off a series with episodes like Code of Honor, if you were then going to torch everything to do with that series because it's not in your book Star Trek, it would have never got anywhere.
We've said it before, but I mean, if you go back to when that launched in '87, if we had social media back then, there would have been just as many people that were like, "This is Star Trek is Kirk, Spock, McCoy. It's not this thing."
It was really badly received by a lot of people. It was only I would say series 3 that it started getting to the point where it's regarded as now, and all Trek series with the exception, I would say, of the first one, because it was an unknown quantity back then. But all Trek series have taken a little while to, find their footing.
I mean, to be completely honest, though, and just to give a fairer impression to the audience, I'm certainly not one of the people that sits and says, I love everything because it's Star Trek and I will always love it. And I mean, I think it's fair to say that we both don't like Section 31 as an idea, and we're not enthused for something that follows them, particularly if it, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's going to be glorifying the Black Ops thing and it's going to be all about that. And it's like, well, you don't know that. You haven't seen it yet. And I have enough kind of faith that it might not necessarily be, oh, look how cool these murderous, amoral bees are. You know what I mean? Because, yeah, okay, that isn't particularly Star Trek-ish in terms of the overall feeling. But having said that, the action looks pretty cool. It's got Michelle Yeoh in. I was relieved to see, like I said to you a while ago, that they've included the legacy character of Rachel Garrett, and I was terrified they were going to ruin that character. But then the latest trailer has it that, like, no, she's the liaison from Starfleet. She actually literally says, like, oh, I presume I've been assigned by Starfleet to make sure you don't murder anybody. And I'm like, see, that they get it. They're not like, yeah, to help you murder, isn't it cool? Yeah. It's like, they understand what franchise this is. But I think a lot of it is also people that want the things they love to be a monolith. So, and Star Trek as a franchise is the kind of thing, I remember Leonard Nimoy of all people saying this years ago, where it can take you anywhere and it can be anything. Like, to your point from earlier, people would have said years ago, Star Trek can't be a half-hour animated comedy. And Lower Decks just proved, yes, it can, absolutely. Yeah. And it will. Trek can't be a cartoon aimed mainly at kids, but with family. Yeah, it worked. It was, So...
Yeah, every show has its stinker episodes. Every show. And every iteration of Trek has had stinker episodes. But it's still Trek, and we still love it. So, I mean, if this comes out, and I mean, I will admit my expectations are low just because of the subject matter. They're more high than it would have been had Michelle not been involved. I'll watch it, and I'll probably get some enjoy. Like, it's the same thing with everything, all my franchises that I love. If it has those moments that I can latch onto, I can always get something from every episode or every movie of the franchises that I love. I mean, as you say, look at what movie we're reviewing today.
Yeah, we'll move on before we end up taking 3 hours about non-Trek things. So yeah, the first thing that I wanted to get into, if we concluded the hailing frequencies and talking about the state of the Trek universe as best we could, is to jump in and start, beginning our analysis of the film in question.
Spock?
Yes, as I mentioned many times, we are going to be reviewing Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Now, as we do for all of our Trek and all of our film reviews, you know how I like to start, DK, and it's to ask you if you can remember your first experience of watching Star Trek V and what you thought of it at the time.
I can, and I've got very vivid memories of this one. I don't normally do this, but I think I loved Trek 4. Loved it. I got an ex-rental copy, and it was... I knew every word off by heart. And one of the things that always sticks with me is Klingon ambassador John Shuck in the trial. My words, there will be no peace as long as Kirk lives. And yeah. So when Star Trek V was announced, both me and my friend were just like rubbing our hands together, thinking, "Oh, it's all going to kick off. It's it's
oh dear.
This is what's going to happen. There's going to be some serious Klingon action in this one because we don't, you'd seen Christopher Lloyd as Krug in Trek 3, and you just thought it's going to make that look pitiful.
Oh,
so I'm getting hyped up. I'm hyped up for this movie, and those my parents read something in the newspaper at the time, and they just said it's going to be about I'm looking for God. And I just went, no, this is going to be about, the Klingons and all that kind of stuff. And you reading the newspaper, even back then I was cynic, and you're just reading the fake news. You're reading the newspaper. It's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. So the day, okay, I mean, I was even hyped because I mean it was 1989. The number of awesome movies that came out in '89, like Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, and the Keaton Batman film. And I remember film '89 with Barry Norman. It showed the briefest, just couple of seconds clip from Trek 5, and I was so hyped up. And so me and my friend, hello Justin, if you're listening, we went opening day. We went down to the cinema. It wasn't a very packed cinema, I have to be honest, and we sat down all ready to just be blown away. That's not how it went. We kind of looked at each other at the end of it, and we're like, "What was that?"
Very reminiscent of the Enterprise at the start of the film. You were sat there like, "Yes, let's see what she's got," and then the movie started, and it was like,
exactly, and it was just like, "Oh dear," and I didn't enjoy it. I read the novelization. I think a few weeks later, and in some ways it kind of made me enjoy the movie more, and in some ways it kind of made me hate it even more.
Right.
But yeah, I was severely underwhelmed when I went to see it at the cinema.
I can only imagine. Oh, that's so weird. I love to hear that because it's completely a wildly different experience. Could not be more different than mine, worlds away. I'm a little bit younger than you are, obviously, and I've mentioned a few times the first Trek film I saw in cinemas was Insurrection, so this one wasn't one of the ones that I did. So I was quite new to Trek when I first watched it, and I can vividly remember that my mum was the Trekkie, as I've said a few times, but she was very much original series purist for a long time. She's not like that now, but I think, as you said, if you go back in time to like 1989, even though Next Generation was around, a lot of people were just like, yeah, it's not really Star Trek. But I do remember that when there was only 5 movies and this had come out, that the critical response to it was so bad that they just considered it like, oh, well, it's killed off the last of the franchise. They assumed the title and the way that it was marketed and stuff meant that it would be the last one. It was very much final. There was no, we had no inkling that the undiscovered country was down the road or whatever. And I was working my way through Star Trek stuff, so I'd seen, my mum had VHS copies of the 1st and 4th movie. Didn't love the first one. Like you, I loved the Voyage HoM because it's, it's probably the one that's, I think, most appealing to a kid mind because it's funny. So I think I was just like, yay, cool. And then on TV, during either a Christmas or an Easter season or whatever, caught Star Trek 2 and 3, loved them because they were like, rollicking starship action and adventure. And, when you've only seen Star Trek 1 and 4, it was like, wow, these people can move. Who knew? So I'd seen the other 4 movies, but then, like I said, I remember this being around. My mum obviously didn't own it or whatever. And like I said, the franchise seemed like it was winding down. And the general consensus just seemed to be, oh, they finished the franchise with that awful film now, that last one, so bad nobody's even watched it, and it just sees them going on a hunt for God past the barrier, and it's the last one. It's just, they've sputtered to an ending and, went out with a whimper, and I was just kind of like, oh, that's a shame. So I never had this anticipation of what it might be, and I just remember watching it for the first time because, as I say, I'd seen the other things and I'd started to get into Trek, and then I started watching Next Generation and loving it. So it was probably in the mid-90s when I got a video set of what was then, in fact, it was the mid-90s because it was what was then the first 8 Star Trek movies on video. So it had the first...
you got a whippersnapper.
Oh, man, tell me about it. So, yeah, it was just... Star Trek First Contact had just come out, and it was a video set that was 6 videos. The middle one was 30 years and beyond, because it was 30 years of the franchise. Generations and First Contact had their own individual videos, and the first 6 movies were on 3 videos, so it was like 2 together. So obviously the third video would have been 5 and 6, and that was the first time I'd seen 5, because I was like, I'm going to watch these all the way through, and it'll be a rewatch for 1 to 4, and then I'll finally see 5 and 6 and see what they're all about, because by that point they'd been out. And I'd seen Generations at that point because I'd seen Next Gen and caught that on TV. So I came to Star Trek 5 with no expectations, and yeah, it was still underwhelming, don't get me wrong, but I don't think I quite had the level of vitriol that a lot of people had to it. I was kind of like, well, that's rubbish, but it's still kind of fine. I mean, it's still a Star Trek movie. Stuff happens. There's a couple of gags that work. And I think it might just be because, like, I knew I still had Star Trek 6 to come, and it wasn't like I had to wait 3 years. It was like, well, that was that one. Now let's try the next one. And so I didn't mind it as much because I immediately followed it up with 6, which, as we know, is a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, oh, well, you know.
See, that kind of shows our age, because I got the box set of the VHS, and it was 1 to 5. Wow. So this was the last one in the box set, and at that point, I don't think I knew that there was going to be another one. And it came with I think it was the 25th anniversary. It came with 25 years of Star Trek video, which were hosted by Shatner and Nimoy.
So weird. I had the 30 years one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I do remember. I did know that Undiscovered Country was on its way, because they did a big feature on the making of that during that 25th anniversary.
Yeah,
but I don't know if it's because I kind of gave myself Stockholm syndrome, but because of this box set, I watched 5 so much, and I think it's kind of grown on me. In the way a fungus does.
Yeah.
Can you remember one of the promo posters for Trek 5?
The seatbelt one.
Yeah, why are theatres putting seatbelts in theatre for the summer? And you came out thinking, I don't know, was it
for that?
Yeah.
To stop you jumping off the seat to your death, maybe.
Were people going to get motion sick from the leaping back in revulsion?
I think no, that poster really only exists because the schedule, as we'll get into, the production was so fraught and schedule was so far behind that they didn't even have like pictures or images that they could use for the publicity campaign. So yeah, that poster specifically is like a star backdrop and then a cinema seat with a seatbelt. There's nothing Star Trek related on that poster because they had nothing to show. It was just kind of like, oh dear, that's how badly things are going. Is it all right? Great. But anyway, as I say, we'll certainly get into that. But it's weird how we have very different experiences. I'd love to hear yours if you're listening, by the way, your first experience with Star Trek 5, because often with these movies, it's the slightly less well-received ones that I'd love to hear people's responses to. Speaking of which, when we jump into the writing and plot, I do want to play Jeremy's information just as a starting point to jump off of, because, like I said, he spent a good 5 minutes chatting about his thoughts on The Final Frontier, and he's very much a counterpoint, I think, to some of ours. He unashamedly loves a lot of the things about the movie and explains in detail why. But before we do that, we have a couple of things that we have to deal with first. First of all, if you are listening on Hit or Miss Star Trek, and this is the last of the ongoing series, you know that there's something that we always do, and that's a limerick and a haiku for the film that we're about to review. So, DK, I have a feeling I heard from you when we were going to record this that you had written haiku and a limerick for Star Trek 5?
I have, yes.
Yes, and I definitely have. I've got them right here. So, yeah, without any further ado, we're going to jump into one of those. So I'm going to be generous and ask you if you want haiku or limerick to be done first.
I always go for the haiku, so I'll stick with that trend.
Okay, the limerick will wait then until towards the end of the review. Hopefully I'll remember to actually say it.
Or unless we forget.
Well, I'm gonna make a note, because otherwise I will blatantly forget. You have no idea how long my notes are from this, and we haven't even started, so... Yeah, this might be this one. So, anyway, this is certainly going to be an editing challenge for me. So, would you like to go first with your haiku, or would you like me to give mine first?
You go for it, dude.
Mine's not particularly great because haiku is always quite a restrictive form, I find. But I stuck to the number of syllables, hopefully, and I think described the film well enough. So my haiku is simply: the hunt for Eden. Cybok brainwashes the crew. Kirk will die alone. I think it sums it up, a fair bit. Come on, then we have to hear yours.
Okay. Marshmelons and God. Why do Trekkies suffer this? It's because it's there.
That is so much cleverer and funnier than mine. Like, that is good. I like that. That one, you have to send me that. I'm going to include that in our eventual book that we make of the limericks and haikus, because that's a great summation of Star Trek 5. Awesome. Right, so Then the next thing we would normally do on a film review is to jump into the behind the scenes section. Random information just about the kind of making and the behind the scenes of this movie that I have. And DK, if you think of anything or there's anything that I haven't touched on, feel free to jump in as well. So yeah, I will start by saying, as far as the Final Frontier's plot is concerned, the primary inspiration for Shatner's initial idea was the phenomenon of televangelism and the high potential for fraud among its practitioners. Apparently, Trek creator Gene Roddenberry disliked the original script, though many people think that was partly jealousy because they'd been allowed to do what he hadn't been with the idea of a search for God, which he was basically vetoed on when it came to the motion picture. And some sources say there was a little bitterness that they were allowed to do the plot that he'd kind of been prevented from doing. Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley both objected to the idea from the original script that their characters would betray Kirk. Even despite Cyborg's influence, which is why in the finished script, neither one of them do. The script went through multiple revisions to please the cast and Paramount Pictures, including cuts in the effects-laden climax. More on that later, because that's another exciting thing. A Writers Guild strike also...
Effects-laden, in quotation marks.
Oh, if you haven't seen it's on YouTube, go and look up the original idea for the Rockman that was going to be the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Anyway, chef's kiss.
The fact that I even read as well, like it looks pretty dodgy. It's clearly a man in a suit, but it's it's effective enough in its own way. But then you read like the smoke effects were just people off screen smoking cigarettes and blowing smoke into the stage because that's how like strapped for cash they were. It's just like just makes it all the better. Anyway, so yes, that's how the production of this one was going, if you're listening, listeners. So anyway, if you didn't know that. Producer Harv Bennett disagreed with several elements of Shatner's initial story, feeling that because no one could assuredly answer the question of God's existence, the ending of the film would never be satisfying. Bennett also told Shatner that the film had the feeling of a tone poem rather than an adventure story. The studio agreed, reasoning that the subject matter could be too weighty or offensive to theatre goers. Shatner and Bennett then began reworking the story. Concerned that knowing the renegade cyborg's motivation from the beginning of the story was anticlimactic, the team moved the revelation to later in the story. Just to editorialize a bit, I do think that was a mistake, personally. I think it comes a little bit too late in the story, but your mileage may vary. Shatner said that it was Bennett who also suggested turning the God entity into, quote, an evil alien pretending to be God for his own gain. So there we go. Dixie State College professor Ace Pilkington notes that the film has roots in many plots from the TV series Star Trek, including The Way to Eden, which also deals with a brilliant man hijacking the Enterprise to find the place of creation, but also the episodes The Apple and Shore Leave. A common thread between the paradises described is that they are always too good to be true. John S. Schultz agrees, pointing out that the idea of paradise has been seen many times in the series, but is almost always illusory or deadened. So, yeah. Moving on a little bit to some of the acting BTS in the movie, William Shatner apparently practiced aerobics and strength training daily to prepare for the role. The physical activity and directing duties meant that he woke at 4 a.m. every day during filming, no matter what time he fell asleep. Lawrence Luckenbill was eventually cast as Cyborg. Sean Connery was originally contacted to star in the role, but was busy filming Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, one of the wisest decisions in cinematic history. The mythical planet Shakari was named in his honor. Obviously, Sean Connery. Bit of a hold the door situation. Shatner discovered Luckenbill by chance. Channel surfing late one night, he saw him perform as Lyndon B. Johnson, and when Shatner called to offer him the role, Luckenbill accepted immediately. Nichelle Nichols, an accomplished singer and dancer, provided an authentic performance of the fan dance routine in the film. She was outraged when her vocals in the scene were later overdubbed in editing without her approval. George Takei said that despite studio pressure to complete the film on time, Shatner maintained a creative and enthusiastic atmosphere on set. He's quoted as saying, "I have enormous admiration for his ability to block that kind of pressure from seeping onto the set." He also said he found the biggest challenge of the film was learning to ride horses. Moreover, Takei acknowledged, "Despite our sometimes strained personal history, I found working with Bill as a director to be surprisingly pleasant." Despite this, he still expected the film to be a disappointment because, and I quote again, "the script seemed rather a muddle, as if 3 separately interesting stories force-sealed together into one, which made for a confusing and ultimately tiresome 2 hours." kind of hard to disagree with him a little bit on that one. Todd Bryant plays the Klingon Captain Claw. Yes, the Klingons are in this. Bryant was playing ping pong at a beach party when a casting director offered him the role. He performed his audition twice as Shatner requested he repeat his performance, speaking in Klingon. Baffling. Spice Williams Crosby plays the Klingon woman Vixis. She thought she was being cast to play Kirk's girlfriend when she arrived for the audition, but despite her disappointment, recalled afterwards that it was fun to play a villain. The late great actor that I know we both love, David Warner, did not audition, but agreed to the role after Shatner swore that his character would survive the film. And strangely, he gets to be amongst the top billed cast members in the credits, despite having a fairly minor role, actually. But yeah. And George Murdoch was initially set to play the Klingon diplomat Cord, but Shatner changed his mind on seeing Charles Cooper's performance. Murdoch was recast as the God Entity, and he would go on to appear prominently as Admiral J.P. Hansen in Next Gen's The Best of Both Worlds, while Charles Cooper would go on to play another famous Klingon, Kumpek, the initial Klingon Chancellor in The Next Generation, pre-Gowron. So, yeah. William Shatner apparently got the gig directing the film because of a kind of, I forget the exact name for it, but basically a like-for-like clause in their contract between him and Nimoy, where if Nimoy got to do something, Shatner got to do it as well. You know, if they got paid a pay rise, the other person would get it. So because Nimoy had directed Star Trek 3 and 4, Shatner, you know, was kind of in a position to demand to be able to direct 5. Not that I'm saying that's what he did, but that's basically how and why it came about. And I think that's it, other than I'll get into the audience response and stuff at the end, but that's all I have for the BTS, unless there's anything else you had that you wanted to bring up, DK?
No, you pretty much covered everything that I did have. I do remember a lot of this from writing it the first time. There is one that stands out for me, but I'll bring that up when it comes to production.
Okay. If you're sure, that's fair enough. So, as I said, we've kept you in suspense long enough. So I did want to play for DK, because you haven't heard it, and just for the audience at home to hear his thoughts. I wanted to play Jeremy's sort of little thing on this. Let's see. It is, if I can find it, it is 5 minutes, 55 seconds, so 6 minutes. So, DK, do listen. I think it's interesting. Apologies, I know it's going to be a long gap for us, but I'm going to play this through. It'll hopefully pick it up on the the recording. If not, I can hopefully edit it in if need be. But yeah, this is our former guest from one of the previous Silver Screens. He was on our Willy Wonka episode. Jeremy Duncan, what are your thoughts on Star Trek 5?
Hey guys, I really wish I could be there with you when you record this episode, but sadly I can't. And that's because I really like Star Trek 5. You can attest to this, is on the Discord server, my name is the Laughing Vulcan, as in a laughing Vulcan. So now, I don't know what y'all are going to say about this movie, as its reputation is quite maligned, but I wanted to give a little rundown and a defense of it before you potentially eviscerate it. First off, yes, this movie has problems. And I'm not saying it's the perfect Trek movie, but it has merit. The plot is incredibly intriguing. A Vulcan who helps others embrace emotion and makes the universe a better place, searching for Shakari, hoping to find God at the center of the universe. It's an insane plot, and only one that I think a show like Star Trek could pull off. So I do think Cyborg being Spock's half-brother is a little too much of a coincidence, but this is also the film franchise where Spock's body happened to land on the Genesis planet, and that happened to grow up at the right age, right before his Katra was reunited with him. And don't tell me Spock planned the whole thing. He did not do that. That's impossible. On that vein, I love the character of Cyborg because he is the center of what this movie is all about. Faith. He's someone who truly believes by their faith and is a genuine believer of what he preaches. Almost every single person who interacts with Cyborg is much better for having done it. It is a noble quest, if you are convinced they exist, to go meet God. So at the end of the film, Cyborg goes and does what he... So at the end of the film, Cyborg, he goes to what he thinks is Shakari. Then another crucial character in the film plays a role, and that is Kirk. Now, Kirk has constantly cheated death and almost functions to the level of pure cynicism after that was stripped away from him from the death of his son David in Star Trek 3. He refuses to let his own secret pain be known because, in his words, his pain is his own, and he needs his pain. And this is because Kirk guards his heart more than anyone else. The drawback to this mindset is that Kirk sees the world very bleakly. He's enveloped in loneliness to the point where he admits to Spock and Bones that he's always known that he would die alone. So if you take Kirk, the ultimate cynic, and Sybok, a man of pure blind faith, and compare them, they are almost a complete juxtaposition. However, that's why Sybok taking Kirk was essential to the theme of the movie. At the climax, Sybok is enchanted and utterly taken in by this being who says he is God. But then Kirk cuts in and says, "Excuse me, but what does God need with a starship?" Sybok was blindly willing to devote himself over to this being, even offering up the Enterprise before Kirk interjected. But Jim's critical thinking and this being's response helped snap Sybok out of it. And instead of despairing that everything he put his faith into was false for too long, he uses his gifts to do what is right and lives out his faith even when what he believes in lets him down. Skepticism is a very healthy part of any person's faith. Your faith in science, your faith in religion, your faith in almost anything in our institutions. If your faith can't take basic logic and reasonings, then you need to reevaluate it. Something I remember my mom telling me was that my aunt told her not to watch this movie because it made God evil. And I think that's one of the reasons this movie was poorly received in America at the time, was because of a lack of understanding of a metatextual narrative, and also that it was implied that this being was an imposter. I mean, it's not a loving God. So, another moment I wanted to touch on is that my favorite scene in the whole film is where the secret pains of Spock and McCoy were exposed. This movie almost seems lighthearted during the majority of the time, and then these two moments hit. The most powerful being McCoy ending his father's life just before a goddamn cure, as he was said, for his condition was found. That's so heartbreaking. It's so powerful to think that Kirk, though, in contrast to this, he doesn't show his pain. He doesn't allow it to be shared. And so we don't know what it is. We can guess that it might be the death of his son David, or the death of Edith Keeler, or any of these other things that have happened to him, but we just don't know. That makes it all the heavier. Also, just another little thing, even though, of course, we have the fan dance and Uhura and Scotty's weird love scene, those don't age well, but the rest of the interpersonal dynamics of the Enterprise crew feel the most like they did in the original series in this movie. And I think that's because Shatner was directing it, and he knew these people, and he knew what their strengths were, so he gave them that. Also, the visuals and the score of the movie are very stunning. Shakari's musical piece is beautiful. It's beautiful as all get out. Oh, and also, another thing to say is that it followed a deeply successful trilogy. I would not want to follow The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock, and The Voyage HoM. I would not want to follow that, because no matter what comes out next is going to be disappointing to people. And I mean, like I said, it's not a perfect movie, but it's a movie that grapples with faith and logic and reconciling those two things. But yeah, Star Trek V has something to say, and I think it says it well enough to be worth watching and not skipping on your Trek movie marathon. Thank you, guys. Take the rest of the review away.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jeremy. So, yeah, lots to think about there. I think Jeremy hit on a little bits of the actual writing and the plot direction, obviously a little bit about the music and some of the overall themes. So, do you have any particular thoughts that spring to mind after hearing that, DK?
Yeah, I think we should just wrap the episode up there, because he makes everything. He makes some incredibly good points there. It's very succinct too. So I think anything that I would say would just be waffle.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with a lot of the things that he says, and certainly I think his examination of some of the underlying themes about sort of the conflict between faith and cynicism and whatever. It gave me a new appreciation for it that I didn't necessarily see the first time I saw the movie. And yeah, it's kind of to one of his other points. I forgot about the controversy around this film, particularly in the States. Jeremy, being an American, would know this. But yeah, the idea that, well, they find God and God is evil, because I've never understood that, since it's clearly, to me, not God. That's literally the entire point. It's an entity that was imprisoned that is imitating God because it's playing on your faith, or particularly Cybox in this case, in order to gain its freedom. So I never looked on it as like, oh, well, is that what they're trying to say God is? Because I never believed that was God for a second. And one of the lines I love is when Kirk kind of says at the end of the movie, well, maybe we did find God. Maybe God's in our hearts the whole time. It's hokey as anything, but it's a nice little message, especially when you've went out on a search for God and you were never going to actually find him, because that wouldn't happen in a movie anyway. It would be, even if you did, it would be, lambasted and controversial for showing an image or whatever else. And it's a nice way to end what I kind of agree with. Was it Harv Bennett who said, it was kind of a no-win scenario plot-wise, because you were never going to have a satisfying resolution. And I think that was the most satisfying you were going to get out of that. So I appreciated what it was saying there. But yeah, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it anyway.
I do like the fact that, the pearl clutching brigade, who are determined to be offended no matter what, strangely enough took offense at something that wasn't present in the first place.
Yeah. It's like you said, people hear about these things second and third hand and then leap to judgment. And I can understand how, the narrative that would come out regarding this film would be, the Enterprise crew find God and he's evil, because that's the soundbite. But, as you said, the crucial thing that's lost there is they don't. They find a being imitating God who is evil. Who's to say they didn't find Satan, for that matter? Do you know what I mean? For all we know, which again was going to be the kind of implication towards the end of the film, because the point was that this planet would have turned volcanic and it would have been lava and fire, and that's why you would have had the rock creature I alluded to earlier, with the implication being they hadn't actually found paradise.
Back when it was a budget.
Yeah, well, I don't think it ever really had a budget. Back when they thought they had a budget, shall we say?
But didn't they already meet the devil in what is it, Magic of
Megas 2? Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, like I said in the BTS, they'd also met countless paradises and men searching for it and other things. It was a common thread, and as I said again, Roddenberry I think was very bitter because he wanted to kind of touch on that with the motion picture, and it did a bit. But he wasn't allowed to do it as much as he would have liked. I think,
in all fairness, though, if you're gonna, if you've written a script for a Star Trek movie, okay, and you look back and you think, now this is Star Trek, but which episode of the original Star Trek series is it most like? If the answer is Way to Eden, you need to rewrite a script.
Now, we both said we enjoyed that for its, camp value.
Yes, but that does not a cinematic blockbuster make.
I guess. But no, that's fair enough. So no, as I said, Jeremy's kind of took us through all of our sections, but I always kind of mention up front that we just break our notes into sections like writing and plot, direction, VFX and sound effects, music, acting. And we hit them as we go just to keep our notes together. But if we go off on a tangent, we'll just follow that rather than stopping and cutting the conversation dead. So we may as well start talking about, anything that Jeremy hasn't already touched on as regards the writing and the plot. Because I do have a couple of kind of criticisms, a few nerdy ones and a few, I think, fair filmmaking type ones. But I'm going to throw it over to you first and ask if you have anything that we haven't kind of touched on yet.
It is like Jeremy said, it's a bit too much of a coincidence, the fact that it's Spock's half brother. Yeah. And I guess this is what kind of is to a trend, but it started the trend of finding long lost Spock siblings. Yeah. I remember like a meme at some point where someone is slapping a car and it had Spock labeled on the side and said, "This bad boy can fit so many, siblings in it." It's a bit too much of a coincidence, but I can kind of get on board with that. And I do think
I never had an issue with it, but
no, I do think Look and Bill plays it well. I think what it comes to, and this could be down to editing rather than, because I'm not sure how much was filmed. I think the problem with this, especially for its running time, is that a lot of things seemed glossed over. And your suspension of disbelief kind of only takes you too far. And I think a lot of things were missing with regards to Cybok's influence on the story, not just his background. I do like the fact that it's kind of enigmatic. But it would have been nice to, once you know who this player is, to find out a little more about him. And I think that's the problem I have with this. I would like to see, it's never going to happen because, in the list of things that you think are going to get a reappraisal or a director's cut, this is not going to be high on that list. But it would have been nice to have an extended story because you know by now you're either going to hate this film or you're going to love it, and the majority plainly hate it. But those that do like it are not going to be opposed to seeing more of the story. I would like to see a bit more on Cyborg. I hate, and I know it's a definitive decision on the part of Shatner to concentrate on the trio, but I hate the fact that you just have to accept that Uhura and Chekhov and Sulu have been brainwashed, and it just seems it was done so easily. And as much as Nimoy and Kelly took issue with it, I'm sure Takei and Koenig and Nichols also took issue with that, but they didn't have that power behind them that De Kelly and Nimoy had. I don't like that it instantly glosses over and instantly kind of makes them antagonists.
And
I
guess
it's weird because I'll say this for Shatner: he was ambitious because there's a lot. There's a lot in this that could have done with. I mean, I do believe it again. I'm hazy, but I do believe it touches on Sulu and Chekhov in the novel on their pain. There's a lot here. It's not just you can be glib about it and say, oh, Star Trek 4, the one where they go back in time and look for whales. Star Trek 5 is the one that they go looking for God. Both surmise their plots fairly well. However, there's so much potential in Trek 5 for things to be expounded upon. And it never does that. And I think that's one of the problems I have with it. You have to take things at face value. But when things aren't explained to any kind of degree, such as the other, one of them is passing through the Great Barrier. It's just kind of hand waving away here. Really,
the thing that bugs me more about that is that Kirk actually has the line where he's like, "The Great Barrier, no ship can pass through the Great Barrier." Dude, your ship did twice.
Yeah, and then it does it, and then the Klingon ship does it, and it's just, I don't know. And just one scene would have been enough, showing why the Romulans cannot be asked getting involved in this, even though one of their representatives. Again, it's in the book.
No, I don't mind that because I would counter that. I don't think you even need the Klingons in this. I think they are a subplot too far and they're completely superfluous.
I hate the Klingons in this. No offense to the actors. We'll get to that. No offense to them. But as you say, they're superfluous and they come across as more like caricatures of Klingons.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Rather than...
And the resolution is just so freaking stupid. Like, it seems like they just didn't know that they had to resolve that plot line. So they were so focused on how do we do a satisfactory ending to the whole search for God thing that the Klingon resolution being just, oh, your boss told you off.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, you're the Klingon governor or whatever, so you told them off and they all started behaving themselves and invited you aboard and you all had a good laugh. And it's like, that is beyond stupid.
This is what I mean. It just seems the elements are there, the ambition is there, but the execution is just not up to scratch. I would like to have seen Shatner's cut of this and see if it improves any, but we're never going to get it.
No, he had said he would like to do it, but it would never happen.
No.
To your points, I think I kind of want to expand on a little bit and agree with you on a little bit of it, because starting with the whole Cyborg of it all, I should have said in the BTS, but basically Gene Roddenberry said when this film came out, it was apocryphal. He refused to acknowledge it was canon. And as I said, some of it might have been jealousy about being allowed to do the search for God thing. But one of the biggest problems he made publicly known was that he says it ruins the character of Sarek, with the idea that he was either unfaithful or fathered another child or whatever. So he didn't regard it as being, canonically Spock has no brother. It's all nonsense, this film, But of course, that is within itself rubbish. The film is canon. It exists. I mean, even if you didn't want it to, Strange New Worlds has kind of cemented it now with the return of Cyborg and stuff anyway.
Again, going back to what we said at the start, just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not Trek.
Exactly. Even the creator of the franchise doesn't get to be like, I don't like it, so it's not Trek. I mean, it's you just don't get to do that. And I remember he had a similar opinion with the animated series, and it was considered non-canon for years because the rights holders, Paramount or whatever, were like, well, Gene says it's not canon, so it's not. And then when he passed away, a lot of people were just like, well, of course it is.
Yeah. Apparently he didn't. He had more than a couple of words to say about Undiscovered Country as well. And,
probably,
yeah, he got into it with Nick Meyer, and apparently Nick Meyer regrets it because shortly after Roddenberry passed, and he wishes he could have resolved the situation.
Yeah, it's a shame, but like I said, I mean, franchises grow. Nobody owns them, not even the person, like I said, that created it. And by this point, he was very much just an executive consultant. But I kind of see his point in the regard of but I never really saw it as ruining Sarek's character in any way, because who knows what goes on during Ponfar and whatever with the Vulcan, you know what I mean? It could be, they have a built-in excuse, quote unquote, you know what I mean? So yeah. I never looked on it as a bad thing. And I always liked the idea that, as a counterpoint to Spock, I think making Cyborg related to him is really cool because, and again, they don't do nearly enough with it, to your point, because the idea of him having a brother who is full Vulcan, but completely abandoned that to act fully human, when Spock is as you see in his vision, he's kind of, he's far too human, but he wants to be fully more Vulcan and can't quite reconcile that. The idea of that, those two clashes would have been fascinating, but they don't do nearly enough with it,
No, it's a really interesting dichotomy, and they do very little with it.
And I wanted to agree with you, as I said, that they don't do enough with Cyborg's quote-unquote powers, because regardless of whether you think, they wouldn't be strong enough for Spock and McCoy, to betray Kirk and the others kind of become antagonists, I've never, in any watching of this film, had any idea why his powers work that way. Why does taking away your pain, which isn't really what's happening because it's kind of exposing your pain to take it away, which is within itself a weird thing, but why does doing that then make you kind of a mind-controlled slave? It's never explained with any kind of logic. It's just like, well, it does.
I can't hand on heart say that it gives a reason for that in the novel because I don't remember it to that degree.
I don't think there is one. It's just one of those things where you can tell it kind of came about during a kind of brainstorming script writing session where it's like, and Cyborg uses his Vulcan powers to take away their pain, and they become, effectively drugged out, tripped out hippie types that are now going to follow him anywhere. And it's like, why? I mean, at least embrace it and be like, he's using his Vulcan powers to literally mind control them.
I think there is that. I don't specifically know, but I think there is that angle again in the novel, and it
needs to be in the movie, really.
Yeah, this is what I mean. There are ways for what it is, for what's contained within, and yeah, it's easy to say, as I said, they're going in search of God. Yeah, that's true, but there are so many personal angles in this, and I think that's what causes the movie to suffer. You get some brilliant, and don't get me wrong, you get some brilliant moments between the trio. But it goes back again to what, the supporting cast said about Shatner back when they were filming the original series, that Shatner treated Kelly and Nimoy as equals because they were also kind of top billing, but everybody else were kind of brushed to the one side. And I think those worst excesses, all fair play to him because, if D.K can say he made the set good, he's doing something right. But intrinsically, you are relegating that supporting cast even lower. And you're not giving them time to shine. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because you get some wonderful moments between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and some really, in-depth moments. But for the limited amount of time, something's going to have to suffer for that. And for every wonderful moment you get with those three, pretty much everything else suffers.
Yeah. I mean, like you kind of again, you said this without saying it, but I think it also is a problem that the film just has too many characters. So
yeah,
you cast someone like David Warner to play a role that's on screen for about 10 minutes, and again, it's a fascinating concept. This idea of Narendra 3, a planet of galactic peace, where there's a Klingon, a Romulan, an ambassador living together, but they've been abandoned by their respective governments as a failed experiment. That would have been a great film within itself, but they do absolutely nothing with it at all.
So... And that's the thing. The Klingons only kind of stumble upon this by accident. As you say, they're kind of superfluous to the plot.
Yeah.
And in the book, the Romulans have this meeting about this ambassador that's been kind of kidnapped. And it's basically, shall we send a ship? And it's just like, no, we sent her to that planet in the first place. We just don't give enough of a shit about her.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could have a 2-minute scene with regards to that. What annoys me is because everybody's hyped on the Klingon stuff, and I'll hold some personal responsibility for that. From the previous movie, you expect to see Klingons, but they just kind of throw them in there, and then the Romulans, they just kind of go, we'll forget about them.
Yeah.
I mean, Caitlin Dorr looks nice. Just accept that and move on.
You say that you have some responsibility for it, but I think the film itself does that as well, though. I mean, there's a reason why it stops the action to have, Dr. McCoy literally say, this is a bad idea. We're bounding into the Klingons and they're not your number one fan. And it's like, hang on, you've already got an antagonist. What are you doing? And like I said, one of my biggest issues is by the end of the film, you've got 3 antagonists. You've got Cyborg, you've got Claw, and you've got whatever this god entity is. And you don't need 3 antagonists. That's ridiculous.
It's all egg in the pudding. And it does lead to some nice little visual moments. I love the little scene of Kirk standing on the cliff edge with the bird of prey above him.
Yes.
Looks beautiful. But that's the problem with a lot of this film. There's a lot of nice scenery. There's a lot of good acting. But
there's some crap as well, mind.
Oh, God, yeah. But notice I've not mentioned anything about the effects. But there's not much backing it up. And it kind of, weirdly enough, for a movie about finding God, I think the ultimate experience that you feel after having watched this, especially when you compare it to the others, is it's kind of soulless.
I'd say I wouldn't say that because I think it has enough of a heart and enough of a message at the end of it. And as kind of you and I think even Jeremy said, the interplay certainly between the main trio of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy is enough. There's enough there and enough of that, And I've said, I think I was having a conversation with Jeremy online where I said, I think one of my favorite parts of the movie, maybe I'm spoiling something I'll come on to later, but it's when, Kirk and Spock confirm how much they are bonded to each other. And it's like, I lost a brother, but he came back. Yeah, forgetting, of course, that he'd actually lost a biological brother by that point. But we'll ignore that.
When I say soulless, I don't mean soulless as in say like the trio. But while the film kind of looks pretty for the most part, it doesn't hold up. Behind the surface.
I see your point. I would counter that. I think it's actually all soul and no plot. Like they think that if they crack the interpersonal dynamics, it really doesn't matter what quest they're on. And it's kind of, you can't do that. You kind of have to have both elements working in the same way that you couldn't just have a quest where that's the all important thing and the crew don't interact in recognizable ways. You can't just have a cool thing where it's like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy acting like themselves and having cool bonding moments, but the ultimate plot and reasons behind it are bullshit. It's just kind of, it doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, but having said that, that's one of the things you can, I think, enjoy that make the film watchable, at least if you're working your way through the films or you want to give it a watch. I think that's one of the things that has going for it is those interpersonal dynamics.
Oh God, yeah. If it wasn't for those, this would be a car crash of immense proportion.
Exactly.
I think Shatner really did nail that relationship between those 3 perfectly, and I think he did it in some scenes better than they've done it in any other movies, on either side of this. In that respect, he did it really well. The problem is, as I say, Star Trek by this point wasn't just seen as Kirk, Spock, McCoy. You had your supporting cast, and the very little screen time that a lot of this supporting cast has, they're acting wildly out of sync with what they would normally be.
Yeah, which is part of the plot, the idea that Cyborg's controlling them, and I'll get onto the other reason for that, which is a thing I want to touch on. I mean, I was going to say later, but I'll do it now. I think one of the things that this film suffers from is because it followed the voyage home. It's been said that the network executives said that they wanted as much humor as possible injected into it, because one of the reasons the voyage home is popular is because, like I said earlier, it's funny, and you can kind of follow that. And I think the thing about that is that voyage home, I think, hits 99 to 100% of its comedy out of the park. Final Frontier has maybe 2 jokes that work, and the rest are groaners, like severely bad. So, and you can tell that it's forced. I mean, yes, we probably all got a great laugh out of Scott. He's like, I know the ship like the back of my hand, and then whacking his head and falling unconscious. But when you actually think about that logically, it's beyond stupid. Nobody would know the ship better than him. So it's just there for a cheap gag, and you just think, ugh, how dumb can you get? You know what I mean? Or Uhura's fan dance, I hate that. It just feels exploitative, and like they're struggling to give her something to do. So they're like, well, she's a woman. Sexualize her, that'll do. You know, it's just like, ugh. What?
Yeah.
What are we doing? And the whole shtick with the flipping Chekhov's gravity boots. Just no. Do you know what I mean? Everything. I hate everything about that. From Spock's awful, you don't realize the gravity joke at the start of the movie, to the scene that is easily my worst scene in the film. And you know me. You know I'm a nerd. You know I nitpick. The scene where they shoot up a turbo lift shaft, and not only are the decks labeled in the wrong direction, there are apparently 70-something of them. That would make the ship bigger than the Earth space dock. How stupid that is. That's on a par with the people, including myself, that complain about that scene in Discovery where it's like, let's go to the turbo lift, and then they discover a small freaking planet inside of the ship in the turbo lift network. It's basically that. Like I said, for starters, even disregarding the fact that, we know the bridge is deck 1 of a ship, and then it works its way down as you go down the ship, the numbers go up. They don't go up as you head upwards. And then, like I said, the idea of like, oh, we've stopped just before deck 78. No ship in the friggin' fleet has 78 decks, man. You'd be lucky if it has 30.
It's a lot of the humor does feel very forced. So I remember when I saw the trailer, and Spock saying, "I don't think you realize the gravity situation." It worked better in the trailer than it does in the actual movie.
Yeah, it's way more of a groaner in the movie.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately, I think the franchise at this point, especially after you say the Voyage Home, became like its own worst enemy, because you know how studio execs are. They always take the wrong lessons from whatever is a success. And obviously, as you mentioned, with Voyage Home having a lot of humor in, they thought the way to go would just be to cram it full of that. Some of them work. The ones that do work are kind of underplayed, and I love that.
I think if I may interject, I've kind of made a note of the ones that I think work, and without knowing that I was doing it, they all involve Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, because, like you said, that seems to be what all the focus was given to. So the humor that works for me is let's see. I am familiar with the classics, Doctor, and how come you don't know Row, Row, Row Your Boat?
Yeah.
I liked him better before he died. Do you want me to hold him?
Oh, no, I hate that. I hate that one.
I love that
delivery. I love Kelly, but I think that delivery is just, it's panto season.
Oh, I love it. I love it a bit.
My favorite is I could use a shower. Yes. I just love how that's played. I don't like the slapstick of things like the captain's log exploding with a boing. I just and another thing that pisses me off about the writing. Don't get me wrong. It's always, at this point we've seen Voyage Home. We've seen how many ships Starfleet has got at this point. Don't give me that bullshit about, this is only something that the Enterprise can do.
Yeah, you're the only ship in range, aren't you always?
Yeah, I know. And if they'd have just led with that, other ships, but we need Kirk. All right, fine, but don't. it all feels very kind of cut rate budget Poundland to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, part of the reason for that, as we will touch on, I'm not going to get into that now, but is the effects being, shopped out to a minor company because ILM were busy doing something else. I forget what. Might have been Last Crusade, actually. Yeah.
And I think Ghostbusters 2 as well.
Oh God! Well, they made one good movie, I suppose. Yeah, but no. Just to quickly kind of finish off my notes here because I'm aware of the time. Like I said, I think the humor works when it comes to Kirk, Spock, and McCoy because I really like, even though it is kind of cheesy, I like, Kirk going to hug Spock and Spock saying "not in front of the Klingons," and it did make me chuckle. And despite myself, because I know this is terrible and cheesy, I do kind of like the scene with Sulu and Chekhov not wanting to admit that they're lost and faking a blizzard, and then Uhura's like, "Your secret's safe with me," because that's like the only bit of banter that those three get, like you said. So it's nice to have at least that.
Special shout out. I do have to give a special shout out for all its really bad, and I mean bad humor. There are moments in this that do a complete 180 on you, such as the scene with McCoy and his father. I find that incredibly difficult to watch. No matter whenever I watch this, I dread that moment coming up.
That moment stuck in my brain so vividly since the first time I saw this movie. To the point that that was a period when I was convinced I was going to be like a scriptwriter, and I came up with my idea for my own Star Trek series. And I was like, I just ripped off wholesale that idea for my chief medical officer because I was like, that deserves way more than one scene in a movie. I'm going to explore the shit out of this,
Written so well, and to his credit, DeForest plays that just stunning,
heartbreaking.
I find it. I think it's the most difficult point in any of the TOS movies for me to watch. I cannot.
I don't know. The transporter accident in motion pictures probably up.
Oh, that's just hokey. But this is just. It gets me every time. I find it incredibly uncomfortable, and you feel for McCoy.
That kind of sums up the movie. Like I said, they didn't seem to care about the larger picture of plot, but they wanted to put in some great moments, and they are there. Like I said, there's some good moments between the characters and some good ideas that they don't fully utilize. But
it needed a studio, and I know we're backing up the wrong tree because it's Paramount, but it needed a studio to give a shit about more than a budget.
Yes, yeah, definitely. But I mean, I think controversially or not, I also think Shatner was not the person to direct this. I'm sorry. I think, and I'm not saying Nimoy would have been better. I think anybody who was trying to direct something this ambitious, who was a first-time director, I think that was a mistake, to be perfectly honest. Because, yes, okay, fair enough, he kept the atmosphere light on set and whatever else, and he delivered a lot of great, like you said, personal character stuff and everything, but it's so painfully obvious this is somebody who's never had to deal with budget or special effects or, the actual filmmaking process. Because he's great at the, point the camera at these great actors and let's see the emotion. Not so great when it comes to any kind of action or VFX or anything. So, anyway.
It's like you said, I think anybody would have struggled with it. The fact that it was his first big directorial picture. It's a shame because I think it got out of hand. I think it just needed a couple of people there to kind of be a liaison between him and the execs. When you've got the execs breathing down your neck and he himself is having to be the liaison and shut the execs out to keep everybody else on set happy, your work's going to suffer because you're more concerned at that point with trying to keep the execs out of the meddling and get on with your job. And you can't really concentrate on art at that point. It needed...
I do also wonder, though, what the film would have been like were it not for Shatner's kind of well-known ego, because I don't know if it's just me, but a part of me is just like, of course, Kirk has to be the big bravado one of like, you're not taking my pain, I need it, I'm special. And I'm like, ugh.
No, I can kind of see that. It's that to me, in some aspects, it's very much the closest that you get to an original series episode, because I always do something like that too. I'm Captain Kirk. It's that kind of, he's there, he's the linchpin. That is fine. It's, Did we really need the Mission Impossible free climbing thing at the start? We know Kirk's this kind of guy. It just seems to be over egging the pudding on.
It's too much.
It didn't need it.
I'm going to move to the acting because thankfully I don't have a lot to say about that we haven't already touched on. Just to start off and say that I do think Shatner. There's at least one scene in this where he overacts terribly, and it's where he's imploring Spock to shoot Cyborg, and it's just the way he's like, shoot him! Oh, come on, Shatner, chill. But saying that, I also think the scene, as much as I criticized it earlier, the scene of, I need my pain, I think is actually a great acting performance by him. So I think swings and roundabouts when it comes to Shatner. What are your thoughts on him anyway in this movie?
I think there's a few in this that have a tendency to overact. Shatner being one of them. I hate saying it, but again, Nichelle Nichols and Jimmy Doohan and Walter Koenig, they all, and I think, unfortunately for me, because he's always been one of my favorites, DeForest Kelley does chew the scenery sometimes.
Oh, I think he's good in this.
I like him. Don't get me wrong. I've never not thought he's a good actor.
Yeah.
But sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes, whether it's the material or the way it's delivered, is a bit cringe. Part of
that though is that the writing, and again, you can kind of blame Shatner for this. Just the writing tries to make McCoy into a naughty schoolboy when that's not really who he ever was, and part of that is the thing we haven't touched on about the kind of, which I never realized for years, about Spock misnaming the marshmelons instead of marshmallows, where like there's an entire cut thing, which probably in your book, I'm sure you're going to mention, the entire cut thing where McCoy hacks the computer and it's entries on like Earth camping rituals to rename them marshmelons because he thinks it'll be hilarious that Spock gets it wrong. And it's just kind of like, that's the level of stupid BS that you're giving McCoy to do. So
I don't necessarily mind so much that, but you've already mentioned two of the lines. I think I wouldn't have expected him to play them that way. And one of them is, we're bound to running the Klingons and they don't exactly like you.
Yeah.
That comes across as...
I don't like that line, no.
Yeah, I liked it better before he died. That to me seems forced. And
no, I like that.
Also the bit at the start where he's watching Kirk through those binoculars. Come relax. You'll have a great time. Great time.
Yeah, okay, that's a little bit much. But I did laugh at, like, if I'm not careful, I'll end up talking to myself.
Yeah, that's kind of saves that line.
Yeah.
But there are times in this, and I don't know if it's, again, the writing, but I do think maybe, I'm sorry to Bill Shatner for this, but I think maybe a better director could have got a better performance out of some of these lines.
Yeah, probably. And certainly when it comes to, like you said, the brainwashed crew and stuff, that is cheese on toast. No.
Yeah, it's... there are some... I love the bit in the shuttlecraft. How many times have you done this? Actually, it's my first attempt. I love the way Takei delivers that line.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. There's certain scenes that are pure gold.
Yeah.
But for every few seconds, you've then got another 2 minutes of thinking, oh, this is a bit like watching Christopher Biggins as Widow Twanky. It
gets a bit carry on, yeah. It really does.
Yeah. It's not helped by the budgetary problems. I mean, with the best will in the world, if you're trying to deliver dramatic dialogue and you've got that 2-bar prop with spinny lights in the background, it's always going to look like something from 80s sci-fi TV.
Yeah. But I do remember somebody years and years ago, there was a British commentator on these things that said, I like Star Trek, but I think the last films, they kind of became Dad's Army in space. And I think this is the one they're referring to when they say that, really, aren't they?
Yeah. It's a shame. Because, as you know, they're all capable of giving great performances, and a lot of them in this have a chance to give a great performance. but others aren't.
Yeah,
we seem to be concentrating more on background characters than, the main cast, as it were, kind of thing. And as much as I love David Warner, again,
I'm glad he came back to do Gorkon because he has nothing to do in this film.
No.
And he's so much better in Star Trek 6 in another role that's fairly minor, but at least has an impact.
You could literally have a series of no names as ambassadors from various things and just say they've taken the ambassadors hostage. That's all you needed to do. I don't care about Cord. I don't care about St. John Smythe. I don't care about Caitlin Dorr. They're there. Yeah, I'm sure they're very impressive, but again, you've not given us anything to care about. You've just thrown something at us and then moved on to the next thing. And again, it all just feels like shortcuts. Yeah. As in, like, here's what we have. This is why we have it. This is why you should
You're going back to the plot again.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Good. No, it's just, I don't know. It's just, yeah. There are some really great performances. I will say, as much as I don't necessarily like the character, I do think Luckenbill gives a great performance.
I think he's great.
Cyborg.
Yeah, I think he's great at Cyborg. He's doing the best he can. I mean, like you were saying, the whole Nimbus 3 thing. I think that really should have been there to emphasize that Cyborg's biggest ability is to get these warring people on the same page and working together. But the film doesn't really deal with that. No. But having said that, Luckenbill as the kind of charismatic, I don't want to say cult leader because that seems a bit harsh, but yeah, kind of, you can kind of see why people would follow him and why they're kind of, without even needing the kind of, well, he's Vulcan, so he brainwashed them kind of thing. He's got a little bit of that something. And maybe that's just partly, Vulcan who laughs. I don't know, but
I like the fact that he does display this kind of caring side.
Yeah. Exactly,
but he can turn on a dime into this arrogant son of a bitch. And it's not because he's deliberately trying to be arrogant, but as Kirk says, he's gone a bit doolally over the years with this obsession that he has. I mean,
I absolutely adore, though, that he turns that around and he kind of, like, at the end, his redemption of kind of using his faith and his ability to destroy this entity, I think is really actually impressive and should have been way more profound than they let it be because they don't play it well enough.
Because, I mean, you look at that little kind of conflab between him and Kirk and Spock once they're captured on Nimbus 3. And he shows that emotion where he's, saying to Spock, Calcitu, because he can't believe it's Spock. And then within a couple of minutes, this is, and next I intend to steal something very big. And, to get his followers kind of riled up. And I think he gives a brilliant performance in this.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't love that scene, but I did love the scene on the horse when he first encounters the guy, even though it feels like kind of what film am I watching here? But he's really good at the, you seem lost, friend. I can sense your pain kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, this guy's already intriguing. And I do love that the idea that he's Spock's brother, like I said, should have resonated. And it does. One thing I do want to shout out is that I think you kind of criticized a lot of DeForest Kelley. I absolutely love the scene where he actually sticks up for Spock, which, being a kind of avid original series watcher, that never happens. And so I'm still shocked even on rewatches when Kirk is like truly, really angry at Spock for not finishing off Cyborg until he reveals who he is.
He could no more kill his brother than he could kill you.
Exactly.
I don't get me wrong. I mean, I love DeForest Kelley in this. I maybe come across a little unfair. I just think a couple of the lines, and maybe that's why I did find them so egregious, is because I think a better director would have made him look better.
Yeah, probably. Like you said, there's just an awful lot of hawkiness. But no, I was going to say I love Leonard Nimoy. I don't think he ever gives a bad performance. But I think he's lumbered with Spock's pain is just shitty. It's kind of, forgive me, it's kind of criticizing the plot, but I think it's kind of, there's no way he could have played this that wouldn't have come off as particularly churlish, especially after we've seen McCoy's genuinely traumatic pain. And that was a secret. It was something he hid from everybody. And then we see Spock's and it's just his dad going, "You're far too human." And I was like, first of all, this isn't hidden pain. It's well trodden ground. We've been here so many times. It's not that impactful, or it doesn't feel it. And Spock immediately negates it himself by going, "Well, thankfully I've grown beyond that." So, since then I have found myself. It's like, well, yeah, exactly. So why are we wasting our time with this?
Yeah. And again, like you mentioned with regards to the plot, I'm not impressed with the performances of the Klingons whatsoever.
No, they are rent-a-goons. I mean,
yeah, you have better written and better performed Klingons in Lower Decks.
Yeah. I mean, I don't blame them, though. I think, like you said, it's kind of the direction. And I will say, to stick up for her, I actually think Spice Williams Crosby is not too bad. But I think her scene that ruins it for me is when she's kind of imitating a human to fake something or other on the comms. And she just has the most perfect, flawless, like she's clearly just using the actress's natural speaking voice. And it's so jarring. Like, you're already speaking English, you don't have to then just lapse out of Klingon into like a Midwest American accent, because it's just too convenient, and it kills my suspension of disbelief when she's like, "Oh, hello, Enterprise. Yes, this is the." How would the flip would a Klingon know to sound like that? It should still be a bit guttural and a bit like, "Yes, Enterprise. This is Starfleet Command," or whatever. People do.
I just find it hard to believe that. Again, it could be touching upon in the writing that. Fucking Klar has a ship. How the hell did this guy get a command?
It's only a bird of prey.
Yeah, but still, and yes, I'm sure they thought it looked cool. I hate that gunner's chair.
It is a bit Skeleton Crew, isn't it? Really?
It feels very much like X-Men comics of the 90s.
A lot of this is quite 90s-ish in that way. You're right, absolutely. Yeah, the Klingons do feel a bit, written by Rob Liefeld.
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to touch on is the direction. I have some things I should probably have mentioned again in the BTS, but I'll start them here and tell you that the mountain climbing scenes were filmed with stunt doubles and rear projection or perspective trickery for close-ups. These had to be filmed twice. Yeah.
You mean that wasn't Shatner? I thought that was Shatner.
Seriously?
No.
I mean, it was Shatner at times, but only if he's like close to the ground. These had to be filmed twice, as the initial versions gave the game away with things like visible trees that showed that the actors were not particularly high above ground level. So, yeah, a lot of perspective trickery and the like. As initial cut ran slightly over 2 hours, not including the end credits or the opticals. I'm not quite sure what that is in reference to. Paramount thought that was too long and said their target runtime was 1 hour 45 minutes because it would guarantee twice nightly theatrical screenings. Once again, studios not having a clue about creativity. So,
anyone was going to be going to the cinema.
Anyway, producer Harv Bennett, who, by the way, cameos in this film as the Admiral who speaks to Kirk on the view screen, was handed the task of shortening the film's running time, despite Shatner's view that nothing could possibly be removed. Shatner was horrified by Bennett's edit, and the two haggled over what parts to restore or cut. So there you go. In early test screenings, the film received negative reviews. Of the first test audience, only a small portion considered the film excellent, a rating that most other Star Trek films had enjoyed. Segments of the film were re-edited again for the theatrical release. 5 minutes of footage was excised to improve the film's pacing. Didn't work. And an additional scene was included on the bird of prey to make the circumstances of Kirk's rescue clearer. The fact that you needed that should have told you a lot. The second screening with the final effects and sound in place weirdly received much better reviews. So, as I mentioned earlier, Shatner wanted to produce a director's cut of the movie similar to that of the motion picture and The Wrath of Khan, with improved special effects and scenes that were omitted from the original release. However, he stated in an interview that Paramount would not support the venture. One of those rare occasions where I can't disagree with them, actually. So, yeah. I think there's some good atmospheric direction on the Nimbus 3 scenes to give Shatner his due, if he was indeed the person who did that and it wasn't the second AD. You've already mentioned McCoy's pain is probably the most incredible scene, and I love the direction of the way Cyborg kind of swoops in and out of the memory. I think Shatner again did a fantastic job with that, showing that he's kind of always omnipresent there. It's really good. And yeah, I've mentioned themes, motifs, the idea of the kind of where no man has gone before plaque on the little steering wheel. I really like that little touch. I like things like the wardrobe. So Cyborg changes into a kind of more humble priest-like robe when he thinks he's going to meet God, which is something that it took me a couple of views to notice, and I'm not sure if anybody's ever picked up on that yet. But, like, he looks almost kind of more military for a lot of the film, or more sort of like Vulcan soldier, and then it's just a simple robe, and I'm like, that's definitely got to be for a reason. I think the climax, though, is too ponderous, esoteric, and dull. And it's just there's just some stupid stuff, isn't there, really? You know what I mean? I've mentioned already my problems with that. So that's my thoughts on the direction. Over to you, DK, if you have anything you want to say.
I don't have much to add. There are some good moments, like you said, the Where No Man Has Gone Before plaque, some of the shots on Nimbus 3, some of the shots on the world at the end, Shakari, as it were. Gliding over the landscape, I think, is beautiful. These shots, such as Kirk facing off against the bird of prey, there's some good imagery in this, and I think that the direction, as you mentioned, with McCoy's section and Cyborg appearing and prodding him along, done really well. I love the little scenes in, what is it, a recreation deck that with that plaque. It's a very.
I don't know what that's meant to be. It's a
very small room.
I don't think it's a rec deck. It's kind of
like just a lounge, I guess.
Yeah, because it felt almost museum-esque because it's got the sailing ship steering wheel at the front with the plaque. And that seems like a weird thing. I don't know, but then, like you said, it's kind of a small room.
Yeah.
So what's it for? I don't know.
I like the whole beacon in that section where it shows them crowding around the table and uplighting on their faces. I think that's done well. Yes. Dialogue aside, I do like the I think the fight shot quite well in the bay where Cyborg's just kind of picking up and swinging him around and bashing him against the side of the shuttle. I think there's some really great visual images in this.
Yeah, I'll touch on a lot of that when we get to the VFX production design because I have issues.
Yeah, I think
good and bad when it comes to the effects.
I know what's coming, but I think a lot of it is let down by the effects. So
definitely, yeah.
So, but that's all I've got on direction. I mean, again, I think if he'd have been left alone to do his job and not had to be this kind of double up as a bodyguard for the rest of the crew, I think there is a chance we could have had a lot more good stuff and a lot less cringe.
And I think if they hadn't been wrestling over what to cut and, the idea of trying to appease everybody with this script, I feel like there's a great script here, but not the one that was put on film, if that makes sense. Like, it needed another pass or two by somebody that wasn't as connected, maybe, who could say, this is what we should focus on, this is what we need to get less of, kind of thing,
Yeah, and again, it would have helped had they not kept undermining him while the shoot was ongoing.
Yeah.
Which is why we ended up with those rock monsters.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes. That was, I should mention before I get into the production design that if you're unaware of this, that as I said earlier, that was the initial idea for the end of the movie, was that it was going to be way more action-based and it was going to be Kirk facing off against a bunch of rock/lava type creatures. But it was abandoned because they filmed one scene, which you can find on YouTube, and it's probably on the 4K Blu-ray. I didn't look. But you can find that one scene of the creature, and in their words, it was so obviously just a man in a suit. And like I said, they were so struggling for effects that they didn't even have a smoke machine. It was just people smoking to the side of the screen, blowing in smoke to try and make it look like this lava-y environment.
I'm not sure if you've read the Shatner biography, the Movie Memories one.
I haven't, no.
Obviously, the original plan was going to be there were a lot of these kind of creatures.
Yes, yeah.
And it was like a diminishing returns kind of thing. And like every meeting that he went to, cutting the budget this much, so you can only have this many. We're cutting the budget this much, so you can only have this many now. And it just seems like something from a farce with what they ended up with. And so I can't blame him for that. I've got to blame Paramount.
No, and I'm the same. Like I said, the idea that one of my complaints is, yes, the ending does seem way more cerebral and esoteric than when it needs a bit of a punch. But it would have had that if you'd had that action scene. And like I said, it was just dropped completely. Nothing was given to replace it. Supposedly, you can still see one or two frames of the Rockman because they couldn't avoid it in the scenes when Kirk's kind of scrambling to avoid the destroying planet. So, but I haven't looked. I didn't go back and look well enough. If you want to do that, viewer or listener, by all means, send us your screenshots. Cool. So let's see. VFX and production design. Yes, I've already mentioned ILM were unavailable, so the company that was used was Bran Ferren Company. Very mixed results, as I'll get into. The art director Nilo Rodis did come back to develop the designs for the film's locales, shots, and characters, and Herman Zimmerman served as the film's production designer. So that's why there's a little bit of Trek familiar niceness going on there. Although I will say that the shot of the Enterprise A from the start of the movie certainly was apparently just literally copy and pasted from the end of the voyage home.
Yeah.
So, which might be why it looks like one of the best things in the damn movie. So I have to mention a few of the things that I have took umbrage with because they are comically bad. They're not just bad, they're hilarious. And I'd love to know if you agree with me on this. So you already mentioned the Klingon blaster, the little gunning chair thing. It looks like Ed 209 to me. It's so dumb. And the way the blaster fires and everything, the way it looks so cheesy. It's so, no, I don't know what. It feels very just hokey for me. It's an obvious kind of stop motion gag, like I said. Didn't love it. The funniest thing in the film is when the Klingons are about to fire and the Enterprise has to hit warp speed in the nick of time. And the effect of it hitting warp speed is so terrible.
It just looks like it goes on a curve.
It's like somebody just took like the image of the Enterprise and then like cartoon cell style just swooshed it across the screen.
Yeah.
It's so bad. It's comically bad that you have to see it to believe it. It's so bad.
Weirdly enough, I don't mind the scene immediately prior to that where the shuttle's boosters kick in. It's CG. You can tell it's CG. It's early CG, so it doesn't hold up, but it still looks kind of good.
There's some things that are good. I mean, to give them their dues, I absolutely love the shot of the Enterprise A in front of the moon. I think the way that's lit and framed is gorgeous, and that is a new shot. That's not from any other film. So credit to them for doing that. I mean, they would have gotten the filming model, obviously, that was already there, because I'm pretty sure it's the same one they've been using throughout. They just added an A onto it. So yeah, and I love a lot of the stuff inside of the galactic barrier. The way that, like, even on my profile picture here, the way the Enterprise is kind of orbiting this bluish planet. I do wish, and this is again the most nerdy nitpick, but I do wish they'd made the galactic barrier the same color as it was in the original series, because it always baffled me that it was supposed to be the same thing that was clearly like a weird magenta pink and then now is blue, which is such a wildly different color. Jerry Goldsmith returns from the motion picture, and I think it shows. I think the music is one of the better things about this. The use of the motion picture theme apparently confused some Next Generation fans who weren't familiar with its origin and wondered why they were using the Next Gen opening theme. Oops. And it uses a lot of leitmotifs in particular for Cyborg, as Jeremy touched on. So any quick thoughts on the music, DK?
I'm not a fan of this soundtrack.
Really? Okay.
It's weird. It's like the approach to the rest of the movie in that sometimes it's beautiful, beautiful stuff, like with Cyborg's theme and the theme when they're on Shakari, fantastic. But when it gets to things like the Klingon theme that was previously used in motion picture, it comes across like one of those cheap cover bands that you hear in supermarkets.
I don't agree.
when you hear that opening title and the Klingon attack in the motion picture, that's beautiful. This just feels like a very cheap copy. And
it's a much more powerful scene in the motion picture, though, to be fair.
Yeah, it is, but it just feels very cheap in this, really. And again, I was saying that I don't know the theme after we'd had the trilogy, and you got the horn, and then you got the Rosenman. This just kind of felt cheap to me. There's a lot of good music in this. I even kind of like the Hiroshima song. Don't mind it, but the soundtrack itself, it varies to me wildly in quality. I don't like especially on the Klingon theme where it's a and then it thinks, what we need to hear is somebody going on a horn.
So the next thing I'm going to do then, we're going to head over to your thoughts and some critics' thoughts in the section that I call Subspace Communications.
Incoming transmission.
Bear with us because we have a lot of thoughts on this one. As we have been doing with the more sort of critically maligned and controversial Trek. I do want to touch on the critics' response to it later to see if it's maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy or if there was any gold to be gleaned from that. And DK is going to cover that for me once I've done my bit. But first of all, I did put out the usual social media message. It was a while ago now because we were going to record this earlier, but I got a lot of responses, and I do want to go through them because I think it's fascinating to see the difference in opinions and the things that different people take away. So I kind of want to do that and keep this in if I can when editing. So bear with me because they're a bit all over the place. I just had to gather them from my phone as I knew we were recording. So first of all, from Blue Sky, from Instagram, Trek.talking says, 5 stars all the way. It's my favorite Star Trek movie. I feel it's as close to the feel of TOS as any movie has gotten. I love the Klingons and character moments, and the soundtrack is awesome. So that person very much disagreeing with everything you said.
I'm giving that person a hot take award. Damn.
Trek talking, I'm on your side, but DK wants the hot take award. So there we go. Our friend Carl, at listening to film on B Sky, says it's a flawed premise that was further undermined by poor choices on the production side, but it gets the Kirk Spock McCoy dynamic better than most of the other films. So yeah, let's see. Over on Facebook groups, 80s and 90s movies, Brian O'Connor gives it 5 stars. From Star Trek fans UK and Ireland, Apollo St. Charles says it's better than it's given credit for being. It has some nice character moments and a few funny parts. I'd give it 3 out of 5 stars. Sean Weaver says weak script, effects were subpar, acting was meh. As a standalone movie, I would say 3 stars. But then adding the fact that it was the first one after the trilogy of 2 to 4, which was phenomenal, that causes it to lose an additional star for me, so 2 stars. From Rogers Sci-Fi Group, Bill Allen says, underrated gem. William Shatner wrote and directed this. It was kind of his baby, and it was supposed to be the last TOS crew film, or so everyone thought at the time. And Shatner, despite being something of an egocentric, actually tried to make this film give every crewman a moment of awesome, really. Some way to shine, at least one scene where they got to show off why they were the best of the best. When The Undiscovered Country came out later, they reduced the competence of the crew by a lot. Really? Because if they'd all been at their regular competence levels, they would have stopped the conspiracy right after the first shot was fired and nobody would have died. I think that's my contender for the hot take award, to be honest.
Well, we've got 2 today.
From my personal Facebook, Tyler Weddle says, best representation of therapy in Trek. Kirk comes off as a toxic asshole whining about needing his pain. Jim, no one is taking the memories of pain away. If you need to feel like you're suffering to move forward, you might be a millennial. Everyone else got some good telepathic healing. I wish we could see how amazing Beta Z is with everyone being aware of everyone else's thoughts all the time. How cool to live on a world where you don't lie because everyone would sense it. Cyborg deserved better. Ouch. 80s Forever again. Mike McWhirter says, one of the most pointless, worthless movies in the Star Trek universe that has ever been made and ever will be. It was a slow burn of bore. And that's it. That's all I have, I think, from my things. Yes, that is absolutely all I have until we get to our favorite bits and pieces. So yeah, that was what you thought. I thought it's amazing how much of the same stuff comes up when it comes to the trio and everyone else being shortchanged. But again, how much difference there is in people's opinions. I mean, we ran the gamut from 0/1 star to 5 stars and everything in between. So be fascinating to hear what critics thought of the movie. So DK, over to you. You've got that information for us.
The critics. It received generally negative reviews. Rob Lowing of the Sun Herald called the film likable but average. The Chicago Sun-Times, Roger Ebert, and Washington Post Rita Kempley panned the film, calling it a mess and a shambles, respectively. The New York Times' Karen James considered the film to be disappointing to fans and non-fans alike, while Chris Hicks of the Deseret News disagreed, feeling that the film approached issues in the same vein as the TV series and that fans would enjoy it. Anson and Lowing considered Shatner's direction during action sequences weak, with Lowing adding that the second half of the film felt directionless. Hicks wrote that the film's broad humour gave the film an inconsistent tone. In contrast, Christopher of the Toronto Globe and Mail called it the most intentionally funny entry in the series. The Christian Science Monitor's David Sterrett stated that it's best. The Final Frontier showed flashes of the humour that propelled the voyage home, and Lowing deemed Shatner's direction at its best during comedic moments. Rita Kempley wrote the Enterprise's objective was to pass through an impenetrable swirl of what appears to be a cosmic Windex beyond that which is the planet Shokara. You know, obviously, yeah. HoM of God, or perhaps California shot through a purple filter. Initially, Shatner believed that the film will get a positive response. In the morning after the opening night, he woke Nimoy up to tell him that the LA Times had given The Final Frontier a positive review. Soon after, a local television reporter also gave the film a good review, and Shatner recalled that he incorrectly began sensing a positive trend. He later agreed that the film nearly ended the film series, and looking back on the film, called it a failed but glorious attempt at a thought-provoking film that didn't come together. As we've already discussed, Gene Roddenberry considered elements of the film to be apocryphal at best, and particularly disliked the idea that Sarek had fathered a child, Cyborg, with a Vulcan before Amanda. Nevertheless, the film is considered canon. At the 10th Golden Raspberry Awards, The Final Frontier was nominated for 6 Razzies: Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Actor, Shatner, Worst Supporting Actor, Kelly, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Picture of the Decade, winning 3, which was Picture, Director, and Actor.
Ouch.
On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 23%, based on 53 reviews, with an average rating of 3.90 out of 10. The site's critics' consensus reads, filled with dull action sequences and an underdeveloped storyline, this 5th Trek movie is probably the worst of the series. On Metacritic, it has a weighted average score of 43 out of 100 based on 16 reviews, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences surveyed the film by CinemaScore gave the film a grade A- on a scale of A to F.
That one surprises me. I mean, I know CinemaScore by nature, it's the people that would be, at early screenings that would be fans of these franchises and stuff. But even still, an A- is, particularly with regards to all the other scores and stuff, just
what the hell did they give things like Wrath of Khan?
I know, right? Got to be A+, surely.
Yeah.
So, that is the audience's response. We're going to end, as we always do, in a little bit with our favorite character moment and line. I do have Jeremy's as well, and then our conclusions and score. And again, I have Jeremy's as well as mine and yours, DK. But before that, I have made my note here, so we don't forget, we have limericks to get to. So your limerick that sums up Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Would you like to go first, and then I follow? Or
no, I'll let you do it, mate.
My limerick for the describing the plot of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Spock's secret brother gets a grip, takes the crew on the ultimate trip. Kirk cares not for Shakari, he just wants some help to see. What does God need with a starship?
We did have to get it in somewhere, didn't we?
I had to do it. I had to do it. So go on then, what's yours?
Right, where is it? I've lost it.
Same as me.
Yeah. On Nimbus 3, it's a matter of course. But Cyborg abhors using force. He'll take our Trek Campus 3 to find Shakari. Remember, be one with the horse.
You really wanted to write be one with the force there at the end, didn't you? Awesome. Cool. Well, then, as I said, we're going to jump in now and we'll give our favourite character moment and line, as I always like to do on my film reviews and on the Trek episodes. So we're going to start with, I'm going to just give you ours after we do Jeremy's. We'll do them all together because it's easier than me jumping back and forth. So I'll start by giving you Jeremy's and say that, as you kind of probably heard in the recording, his favourite character was Cyborg for the reasons that he said. The best line is the exchange between Kirk and Spock, when he tells Kirk he basically technically wasn't lying because Cyborg is his half-brother, which is kind of a weird choice. And his favorite bit of dialogue was, I lost a brother too once, but I was lucky I got him back, I think is what he said. So then to give you mine quickly, if I can find the darn thing. My favorite character was also Cyborg for the same reasons that Jeremy says, and which I'll get into in my conclusion. My favorite scene was obviously the McCoy's pain scene. It seems like it comes from a better movie, and like I said, it's haunted me for years. I kind of agree with Jeremy on the favorite line. I went a little bit further. I like, I lost a brother once. I was lucky I got him back. But I also I thought you said men like us don't have families. I was wrong. But it was a sweet moment at the end of the movie. So, over to you, DK. What's your favorite character moment and line?
Favorite character, again, Cyborg. I just think Looking Bill is acting his ass off in this, and the character itself is really intriguing. Just as an aside, I'm not too keen on him making a possible antagonist of him on Strange New Worlds. I think he would be better left as just this kind of person and not come up, not turn into a kind of Blofeld mastermind. Right. So yeah, I'll go for Cyborg. Scene, it's got to be the McCoy scene. Yeah. Dialogue. You guys have taken the best ones. I'm just going to go with the. I'm just going to be a real basic bitch and just say the. I could use a shower.
Yes. Cool. So then all that remains then is for us to give our conclusions and our score out of 5 stars or Starfleet deltas, and then we'll put it together and come up with an average final score. I don't have a conclusion from Jeremy, but I will say that his overall score would have been 3.5 out of 5, which is what we're counting. So that's going to be the first score that I put down. Bear with me. So did you want me to read my conclusion and score first, D.K, or would you rather do it?
I'll go because mine's only really short.
Mine's super long, but okay.
Yeah, I know. That's why I thought we'd end on you. Yeah, it doesn't really stand out. It's not an exemplary movie as far as Star Trek's concerned, but it's certainly not as bad as all the one hates to use the term haters, but that's what they are. You think of this one over the years. I think it's very much maligned for no good reason. It does have some great parts in it. Yes, they're surrounded by a bit of drivel, but it is ambitious. And if the studio had kept out of meddling, I think it would have been a lot better received. As it stands, however, we're obviously just reviewing the version that we ended up with. It does have some wonderful character moments, but a movie cannot just be made out of character moments. You've got to have something backing it up. And as I said before, when you scratch the surface of and it's not really a pretty veneer for a lot of it, then there's not really any substance backing this up other than those aforementioned character moments. So, yeah, it's nowhere near the best Trek movie. It's in the bottom tier, but I do think it gets unfairly criticised. I think Shatner gets unfairly criticised when I think he did just a fantastic job of not only directing, but keeping the studio off everyone else's back. It's just an experiment that turned out to not be very successful, really. But whenever it's on, I'll watch it, and I still kind of get a glow while watching it. I still respond to these characters, however little we see of them, and it still makes me feel good while watching it. So I'm going to give it 3.5.
Wow, same score as Jeremy. Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, my conclusion was, okay, first, the good news. Is this the worst Star Trek film? No. It's also nowhere near as egregious as some of the worst episodes of Trek. But is it the worst TOS movie? I think so, and by a considerable margin. To be fair, there are some really good ideas here. Cyborg as a concept and character is compelling, so much so that even a hint of him in Strange New Worlds got fans in a mini frenzy. It's a shame then that he doesn't get much to do in the film, and he's written fairly one-dimensionally and a bit too generic for me. The Search for God is a noble attempt at a big story, but I'm inclined to agree that it was just never going to work because there's no satisfactory movie-worthy way to end it. Losing the effects and creatures doesn't help, but the reveal that it's yet another TOS non-corporeal monster TM is just such a huge letdown. I'd have been far more interested in exploring more about Nimbus 3 and what brought these enemy species together beyond a perfunctory mention in the end. The pacing is all over the place with as slow as molasses first hour and a last 45 minutes that seems to race to a finish. The forced humor doesn't always land, and the Klingon subplot has no business in this story and stands out like a sore thumb. All that said, there's stuff here that's good, but it's all micro to the overall plot. The character interactions, which we've said many times now, we've talked to death about that, are great, especially Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, which is a well-oiled machine by now. Some of the jokes hit, some of the effects look good, and honestly, in terms of what made it to the screen, Shatner has a good director's eye, in my opinion. I wouldn't exactly say to skip this film or that it's painful to watch. As a breezy and cozy time with familiar friends, it's pleasant enough, provided that you don't care what the adventure is or analyze it too much. Ultimately, its heart is in the right place just enough, with a very well done emotional message that almost saves the religious allegory. The sweet thesis to take away seems to be about found family, conquering an inner longing. The execution might be slapdash at best, but it's hard to get too mad at that. Even still, I have to give it exactly average and say 2.5 out of 5. Sorry to be the one that's the biggest downer on this one, but yeah, just very middle of the road for me, and I couldn't really see it was anything else. So adding those together and dividing by the 3 of us who gave our scores gives you a final score for Star Trek V: The Final Frontier of actually one of the highest scores on our scoreboard. It's 3.16 out of 5. So not by any means a disaster, actually. So yeah, surprised by that, DK?
I am. It's come out better than I thought it would. I guess they get bonus points for trying.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. And
I will say that for it never feels like a cynical take. It feels like it's trying its best to be Star Trek, even though it kind of falls short.
Yeah, like I said, its heart's in the right place, and it's hard to be too mad at it because it's trying. So yeah. Right then, as we head back out through the galactic barrier, I just have to, as always, thank my great co-host DK.
Thank you.
Are you still keeping hailing frequencies closed as far as social media is concerned?
I am experimenting with one, but I will let you know because it has the potential to disappoint me.
Fair enough. Either way, it's a pleasure as always to have you at my side and talking at length about Star Trek as we often tend to do.
Likewise, and good luck editing this bitch.
Oh yeah, thankfully I have a little bit of time, but I'm going to need it. You can find us, as in myself and the podcast, at the various links that will be appearing on screen if you're watching on YouTube, or follow the link tree that's always going to be in the episode's description. So yeah, that'll do it for us. Hopefully you enjoyed your festive season and you've enjoyed coming back to us. We're going to have a lot more coming for you. I believe if you're listening to this on silver screen, our next episode will be DK with a cult classic. Would you like to reveal or hint towards what that might be?
When is this going out? Do you know?
Early January.
Early January, as in the first week, or
yeah, before Escape from New York.
Escape from New York.
Wow. So yeah, here, tune in to hear. I mean, I hope it will be up before that, but hopefully tune in to hear DK talk all things Snake Plissken with an Escape from New York cult classics review. If you're listening on silver screen, if you're listening to this on the Hit or Miss Who Trek channel, we're going to be back very soon with our very first Doctor Who review. DK will be abandoning us in favor of Escaping from New York, but I will be joined by Connor and George from Pasty Sheep to review this year's Doctor Who Christmas special, Joy to the World, and see what we all thought about that for our first official Who review. So yeah, that'll conclude things here for us, and thus also conclude our series looking at the more iffy side of the Trek universe. Just remember, and never ask a Vulcan about their pain, and sometimes the final frontier is just finding the budget to finish your special effects. Remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper. We'll be back.
Live long and prosper.
I'll be back.
You have been listening to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, part of the Hit or Miss Who Trek channel. Hit or Miss Star Trek is hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Behind the scenes and additional material by DK scripted, produced and edited by Mike Wilson, based on an idea by Mike Wilson and Will Templer. Follow us on YouTube, your podcatcher of choice, and our social media. Links to all of these can be found by clicking on the link tree in the episode descriptions. This podcast is a Media Matters original production. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast throughout subspace. We'll be back for another thrilling trek through the stars soon, but for now, hailing frequencies closed.
Try to warp out of here at once, maximum speed.